Welcome to Divine Downloads. I'm your host, Cassandra, and this is the show where we help you get the tools to divinely design your life. And today's episode is right on track for that. We're talking to Jessica Zweig, author of The Lightwork. And she's going to tell us all about her incredible mystical experience in Egypt, connecting to the Pleiadian teachings that had her overhauling her business and her life and getting into greater alignment than ever before. You guys are going to want to stay tuned. So, Jessica Zweig, I am so excited to have you on and to talk about your beautiful book, The Lightwork. I was just telling Jessica before we popped on, we were connected by a mutual friend. And when I was going through her book, preparing for the podcast, I was just like, oh my God, we have so many parallels. There are so many things in this book that I'm just so glad that you're talking about and that you're putting it out, whether it's from, the first initial kind of like pivot point of kind of like driving yourself into the ground, having this kind of like moment, and then having this beautiful divine intervention,
Yes.
mystical experience kind of happen, and how that has shifted so much, opening you up to, different goddesses, opening up you up to the Pleiadians, and ultimately set you on this new path. And we have so much to unpack. So welcome to the show. I have so much to talk about with you.
I'm here to talk about it with you. I'm so excited and honored to be here. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, of course. So let's start off at the beginning with what kind of initiated this beautiful journey that has given birth to the book and really brought you to share these divine light lessons, right? And I think so many women right now can relate to, it's funny because literally this morning I was texting with another girlfriend in our space, and she was texting me about like, I'm just so like, I'm done with the hustle. Right? Like, I'm over it. Like, this is not. And I was like, I feel like this is like a collective wave that has been happening for the past like couple of years with all of us kind of, especially powerful like women in the spirituality world that have kind of had success from conforming to this like patriarchal spell, as you put it, which I love, of, hustling and grinding. And really the initiative event that, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but it seems like the initiative event that kicked off your whole journey that gave, way to this book was you being in a space where you had a business, you had lots of clients, you had all this stuff going on, and it was no longer feeling fulfilling. So I want to talk about that pivot point, about what it's like, because the thing I think is interesting too, and again, correct me if I'm wrong about this, is that I feel like a lot of us in your story, your business at one point maybe was aligned.
Yes.
Right? Like it was aligned. It's not like, I think there's like a little bit of a difference there.
Yes.
Right? And sometimes it happens when we're doing something that's like never was in alignment, was just something we plugged ourselves into. But then I think sometimes it's even more of like a mind F when we're like, dude, like, but I did start this from a heart-centered place, but I was really aligned when I started this, but it's not working. So tell us about that kickoff journey, the breakdown to breakthrough.
So perfectly said. And thank you for articulating that, because it's really hard to reconcile within yourself when you've built your dream business and all of a sudden you hate your life. You have built yourself a beautiful golden cage and you are stuck inside of it with the freaking key.
Yep.
And, I say that my book, The Lightwork, while it is a book about light, it's really a book about the dark too. And I take you back to the darkest pivot point I've had, at least in my professional career. When I had built the business, I ran an agency called the SimplyBe agency for 7 years. About 5.5 years in, it became this machine that I had to hold up the sky with $250,000 monthly payroll and employees that weren't working and clients that weren't happy and systems that were breaking. And I was like, but I started this because I just wanted to help people simply be online and off because I believe in authenticity and I love personal branding and I want humanity to show up as they are. And all of a sudden it was a prison cell. And the requirement of my system, of my body, of my mind to build something like that was in such excess of energy and output and time and emotions and stress that I found myself at the beginning of 2022. So about 5 years, almost exactly in 5.5, fully burnt out. And when I say burnout, we throw that term around a lot. Like we all feel a lot of the time very tired over it. I was unable to leave my house for months. I cried every day. I didn't shower. I had no energy. I had no motivation. I was ragefully angry. I was like tired to my bones. I was diagnosed with situational depression by my therapist. And I really had no choice but to start to really look at my life and how I was running my business. And, it didn't happen overnight, Cassandra, it happened in stages, and Egypt was sort of the ultimate stage, frankly. But the internalized patriarchy that was running my whole life before I could even, like, before I even knew it. And I often say that women are playing a game of success written by people who are not us, and we're following the rules of this game that we didn't write. And yet we think it's normal. We think it's the only way. And I had to really fall apart and hit like not rock bottom in the sense of, you know, financially or I've hit heartbreak. Like I was cigarette ash. That's kind of how I would define how I felt moving through my days. I wanted to burn it all down and I couldn't. I had to do it every day. And I healed my depression through a ketamine protocol, which I talk about in the book. And I say that while ketamine healed my habits, or excuse me, healed my depression, because ketamine really is a breakthrough therapy and it got my brain back online. It didn't heal my habits. I just went right back into the hamster wheel, like the second I was quote unquote healed. And it really wasn't until about 7 months later, while I was like really in the fucking burnout, that I stepped on a plane to Egypt. And I had the most profound experience of my life there. And I came home from that trip and everything changed. And I'm here today to talk about that journey. And that's what my book unpacks, and to hopefully disseminate this information, this new information of light to women, to show them and share with them that there is a better and different way we can do this thing called business, called life. And yeah, just even talking about that, it's like a completely different identity and avatar of that girl that did that. But burnout was the real burnout was the foundation of where I found this new message.
And I think that that's so, what you brought up, it's funny. One of the questions that I wanted to talk about um, is that, that real thing about being in kind of stuck in that like hamster wheel and that pattern. And I love that you reference sometimes these like spell, quote unquote, of like our, consciousness in the book, because that's what it feels like,
It
right?
is.
It's like you're in this spell and it's hard to break out of it, because even when you go to leave, something pulls you back, right? And or it's just like old patterning that you're so used to, like showing up, you're so used to hustling, you're so used to, this is how I make money, this is how I land clients, this is how I run my business, and it's worked, and I've gotten my like little pat on the back, so I keep doing it. And this other thing that maybe you're feeling called towards, maybe you're feeling called towards rest, you're feeling called towards meditation, you're feeling called towards whatever it is, right? Going on a vision quest, whatever you're doing, right? Feels crazy
Yeah.
because you're like, no, no, that's the thing that pays my bills,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yes.
And so, I want to talk about the Egypt revelation, but one of the things that I love that you mentioned in the book that I've always been kind of also like, I don't know, personally, I've always been a little weird about sharing some of the more mystical experiences I've had because, like you say in the book, which I was like so happy that you mentioned, I never want someone to feel like you have to have one of these experiences
Yes.
to have the after effects of it, right? You can also have one of these experiences and come back and get trapped back in the hamster wheel if you don't take action and shift on it,
Yes.
right? So the experience, which don't worry, we're going to share all of Jess's mystical Egypt experiences, which I love. It's also about what were the things that were there things that you started doing other than the ketamine, which is the first, that was
Mm,
another, like, obviously, like,
mm,
therapy that you were called to, right, to
mm,
shift. But what were some of the other things that you were doing, in that
mm,
stage
mm,
before the divine intervention, let's say, or
mm,
the divine experience, where you were really trying to unravel that
mm.
patriarchy or kind of shift things?
I mean, I've been on the spiritual journey since as long as I can remember. I mean, I was born and raised Jewish. But I was talking to like goddesses and like channeling white light in like my journal when I was like 10. I've always been connected. I found yoga in high school. I was like, this is magical. I had one of the most divine interventions of a spirit guide, my deceased Jewish grandmother in a church in Ireland at 19. I talk about that story in the book. And I just really have been kind of an insatiable spiritual learner and have tried on and adopted all of these modalities. And I believe that our relationship with spirit, and I say this in the book, whatever you want to call it, God, Allah, the universe, light, whatever, Jesus, to me, that relationship is the most intimate relationship you'll ever have in your life. And at least that's what I had discovered at an early age. And so I really work to cultivate that on my own terms. Plant medicine, things like ketamine started to sort of accelerate it and deepen it as I got into my 30s. And yet, I often say that the treasure is in the trigger. And I started to right before my burnout, like as the burnout was really coming on, I should say, before Egypt, I started to really witness what I was seeing in other women who seemed to have prioritized the feminine and got the codes of the goddesses in their DNA and were really standing in that, and how triggered I was by that. Like there was one reel that I posted on Instagram, like the year of 22, where I like did a day in the life. And I like had my assistant follow me around the office, and I was like, I'm in meetings, I'm presenting to my team, I'm scarfing my salad in the middle of that. Then I go into a podcast. I made this a fucking reel. And some girl commented and was like, this is disgusting that you're over glorifying hustle culture.
Oh my gosh.
Uh-huh. I just remembered this. And I was like, screw you. And yet it stayed with me for, I mean, still talking about it years later, right? I feel like, to answer your question, we could go on the quest of the light and find our unique divine connection to spirit through all of the beautiful modalities that exist to us today: breath work, sound bath, Reiki, crystal healing, astrology, human design. I love that shit. I do it all. But the real treasure that you find within your soul, your spirit, your identity here on this planet, what you're meant to do, who you're meant to be, is found in the polarity. It's found in the struggle. It's found in the heartbreak. It's found in the trauma. It's found in the trigger. And so that's really the invitation that my book, I think, ultimately is to go deep into those aspects of ourselves, of our relationships, of our connection to our bodies, the things that truly bring up so much darkness, and face it and be responsible for it and claim it and reframe it so that we can integrate it and ultimately alchemize who we really are.
I love that. I love that you said that because I feel like it's actually something that I've talked about a lot with some of my clients in this like Instagram world. It's a frequent thing where people are being triggered by their Instagram feeds, right?
Duh.
And, right? But I'm always like, your trigger is either like, I feel like it either goes one of two ways, right? Like you could be triggered by maybe someone that you see that's like in their goddess flowy thing, like when you're in that moment and you're like, I kind of like, there's part of your soul that knows that that's like next. It's like what you really
Yes.
desire. And so
Yes.
you're triggered by this person that's like embodying it, right?
Yes.
And to be able to like sit with that and unpack that, or like, or have something like triggers you because it's like informing you of something that you actually do too, that you're no longer in resonance with. And you're
Right.
like, I've noticed that in myself sometimes when I get triggered by people that are like over hustling in my
Mhm.
season of trying to
Yeah.
unhustle or
Yeah.
whatever. I like to
Spiritually
call
hustle.
it spiritually hustle. I'm like, okay, and it's because I see myself in them,
Right.
and it's like I get it, and I'm like trying to unravel that, and so
Yeah.
there's so much juice in like Instagram reel
It
triggers.
really is.
So, so you talk about this is kind of like skipping ahead. So in the book, Jessica divides it into like three different categories: inner light, outer light, future light. And so I'm skipping a little bit to outer light just because I feel like it connects to what we're talking about.
Yes.
When you talk about, because I think so many of us, especially entrepreneurial women, and I know a lot of the women listening to this podcast are either like starting their businesses, have their businesses spiritual, but like, kind of in the same vein as us. And we tend to, I feel like, have this disease or whatever the most of really putting our worth, right, and our value into these accomplishments. And you talk about that in the book about how from a young age, and I can relate to this, both of us got BFAs in acting at conservatory programs and and had older male teachers that kind of, there was like a gatekeeping of it, right?
Mhm.
And so there was a process, whether you don't have to be an actor to do this, but maybe if you were just someone that like needed to get straight A's in school or needed to be like, captain of the whatever team, that we started associating so much of our worth
Yes.
with outward achieving, which I feel like
Yes.
is the primarily like gasoline for
Yes.
this hustle.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, I love, there was a real unraveling for me, right? Because I think I talk about how when I was in high school, I was in the acting department and I never got the lead roles in anything. And my acting teacher told me at one point in a meltdown I was having in his office because I was like, I'm going to quit the department and nobody likes me and I suck. And why am I in the ensemble in every show? And he just looked at me. He's like, Jessica, it's very evident that you don't believe in yourself. And if you don't believe in yourself, no one else is going to believe in you. And I took that on like, okay, assignment given. I'm going to pretend to believe in myself now because I didn't. And that pretending, like I am a classic case study on like the fake it till you make it. Like if you look that up in the dictionary, like you probably see my picture. Like I've made this whole thing up. We all have, right? But all that to say, I'm not making it up as much anymore. But in my younger years, as I was becoming a young adult woman in the world, I needed validation and affirmation from everyone to everything, from boyfriends to my parents to jobs to money in the bank to what my therapist said to what the media was saying to the followers on Instagram to my social status in my city at the time. Like everything was there to prove to me, not from me from the inside out proving to myself, but this external outsourcing of my worth. And as I was writing this book, standing in sort of this full claiming of who I am, right? I thought to myself, what if I took away like my beautiful home that I've worked so hard to build? What if I took away the multi seven figures of money that I've made? What if I took away the best selling book? What if I took away a beautiful man who I get to call my husband? Would I still be worthy? Would I still have worth? And the answer I found to be true is yes, because I was born on this planet as a human being with a beating heart and breath. And I'm here for a reason. And my innate DNA is worthy of existing. And that matters. I matter. And I had really had to chase the spiral of worth, is what I call it in the book, to really uncover that none of those things really were all that fulfilling anyway, because it was this constant like need for satiation. And it's a practice. I'm not like sitting here as some guru who's mastered anything. I'm a student girl to the teachings as much as we all are. And that's really what I'm here to say in the book. Like, girl, let's link arms. I'm your friend. I'm your sister. We're on this path together. But I at least hold up a mirror based on my own unique stories of what we can all unpack and explore and look at together. And I think that worthiness is there's such propaganda around worthiness, and that we're all chasing some, again, made up yardstick that we didn't even place. And it's really important to sit for a second and really examine where that came from. And it's typically ancestral. It goes way, way back.
Yeah.
But that's the invitation.
And are there practices that you find
Mm,
either on your journey or like right now when you have a moment? I mean, you're launching a book, right? So
yeah.
you've done this before. This is not your first book. You've had a successful book before. You know the song dance routine one does, right? And so going into this next book, doing it from this like different,
Yes.
you know, energy state, are there certain like things that you're kind of doing to help yourself kind of recenter and come back to that truth?
Yes. What a beautiful question. So the first thing I did was set an intention, right? And got really, really clear on how I was going to show up differently, what I wanted this book to feel like, the reason I wrote this book, what the experience of a launch would feel like. Because my first book was the book that burnt me out. I had so much back to proving my worth. I had so much to prove with that first book. Cassandra was like, book deal number one. I'm going to go national. Everyone's going to know my name. I'm going to be on every podcast. I'm going to take on every IG live. I'm going to do every TV spot. I'm going to be on social media 24/7, which I was, all of the above, while trying to run my business, while speak on stages, be on a million airplanes, like all the things. And the intention behind that book was like to drive my business. I didn't necessarily need to be like a number one bestseller, although I was on Amazon. It was like, I want to use this book to make money. This is going to be the brochure into my agency. And guess what? It did. It popped my agency off. It was successful. I stuck the landing, but I almost died, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so for this in this book, my intention is I just want as many women to read this book as possible. I want this book to change women's perception of themselves. I want this book to unlock, that's why there's a key on the cover, the light within them. That's it. And everything that I am now doing is all about alignment, you know? And yes, it's easy to get caught up in the swirl, but like I'm not getting on any podcast that I don't like. You're one of them. I love your energy. I love your brand. I love what you share on social. We have a mutual friend. It's all about like the full heart yeses. And is it easy to get caught up in the game and want to sell all the copies and do all the yes, but I'm so much more aware of it now, and I check myself. And I have a meditation. I'll just kind of give away my most intimate practice. Every morning I sit at my altar, and I'm trying to be as diligent about this as possible in the midst of a book launch. And for those listening, it's like you might be not launching a book, but you might be launching a program, or you might be pitching yourself for a new job, or, you know, going through a launch of your own kind. I I sit on my altar, I close my eyes, I call in Isis, I call in the Shekinah, which is the divine light in Hebrew, and I call in Alcyone, which is the brightest star in the Pleiadian star system. And I just feel those energies come through me, and I literally say to myself, get out of the way. And then I say the mantra, I trust, I allow, I receive. Thank you, more please. And that's it. And it's a practice because life can get swirly. But I wrote this book in 3 months. This was a channeling. I usually get like a year to write a book. This book came through me. And it's not about me. It's my ego is in it, sure, but it's not really about me. I really was the vessel. And so if I really come home to that and know that like my work will live in the world in the way it's meant to, and to really be of service, that that is what my practice was. But I had to set that intention. And the last thing I'll say is that I set the highest intention for it to be fun, for it to be fun.
Yeah. And I feel like that is um, so important because I feel like that is like the first thing that they took from us is
Yeah.
what comes through, right?
Yes.
Is the first thing they took from us that it could be fun,
Yes.
right? And that is when you read any spiritual teachings, the thing that kind of comes up again, again, and again, again, again is joy,
Joy.
right? And is heart-centered love, and like that we're actually meant to experience that. And why, like if you think about it, even in your logical mind, why would we not be supported in our joy, right? Why would we not?
Yes. That is our
And
birthright.
it's our birthright. It's our birthright. We're here to experience this. And I love, I think in one of your downloads in Egypt, what came through um, was around like, and this is, I received this similar download in a different way, was how precious this human incarnation is. Like how this is like winning the lottery. And I
Yes.
remember when I fully received that download, and I was like, oh fuck, I never like thought of it like that. Like I never thought of it like, wow, they're like, this is a really precious incarnation. And look at this experience we get to have here. We get to go and like walk in the park and eat ice cream or whatever we want to do, right? We get to like feel the rain on our skin. And like there's so many like really simple things that are just like, if you think about Earth and life on Earth is like an amusement park that we got the ticket to, right? Why would you waste it? Why would you waste that ticket?
I'm so, you are speaking of my freaking soul. I have full body chills. It is literally the whole freaking point, and we have missed the memo. And I had missed the memo, and that is one of the biggest codes I got in Hathor's temple when I had my light body activation, which I talk about in the book. And the Pleiadians started speaking to me, and they were like, like they were talking to me so fast because they were like, she's open, we got to get it in. And they were like, they literally said, I heard them say, like, you have no idea how blessed you are to be in this human experience. And if you don't enjoy it for you, please enjoy it for us. You get to kiss puppies and eat chocolate and have sex and wear cute clothes and travel the world and work a purpose. And you have missed the whole point, girl. This is supposed to be blissful. Like,
Yes.
and Hathor is the goddess of pleasure and bliss and frequency and music and play. And I literally, I mean, I like came up in my throat thinking about how little joy I had had in my life for so many years.
You also had an experience in Egypt this reminds me of, which I'm looking just to the side because I actually quoted it because I didn't want to miswrite it. When you went to see the essential oil shaman,
Yeah, yeah,
Kamal,
yeah. Come on.
and, and he talked about learning to love your pleasure more than your suffering. And I was just like, when I read that, I was like, I think I need that tattooed on my forehead.
Same.
So good. So what is that? So I love just got carried away there because I feel like there's so much I could talk to you about. But I love one that you brought up the fact, and I really want to like emphasize this to the listeners of that like this is a journey, just because, me and Jess have had mystical experiences, we've connected to these and we know these things and we can share them with you. It doesn't mean that it doesn't require our daily practice to keep
Yes.
coming back to it because we all live in a world that is constantly trying to have us do the opposite. And so for anyone that's listening that's like, oh, I know this, but then like every time I try to do it I like fall back, it's like so do we all, right? And it's just about kind of having these practices and having these touchstones and reminding ourselves of these lessons. So let's go back to Gamal. And how would you say, I mean, whether you do it or like what you think of doing, like how can it is so interesting. And I actually think talking about like masculine or whatever, but I remember Tony Robbins, like from ages ago, made some comment about like how as humans we're kind of wired to
Mhm.
run from suffering
Mhm.
more than we're wired to run towards pleasure, right? And
Yes.
I thought that was really interesting. And I think it speaks to like a similar thing, right? Where
Yes.
if you're running from something, your focus is on that. Your
Yes.
focus is not on the thing you're running towards. And
Yeah.
how would you say, in from having that experience of like really running from suffering, which you talk about in that chapter around how, which I also very deeply resonated with, when you reach that state of abundance with your business and you're like, oh, I'm not really in abundance. I had the same moment and I was like, ooh. It's like once it's like that Jim Carrey quote. He's like, I wish everybody in the world would be like successful so that
Yeah.
they can know it's not the answer.
Yep.
Um, so it's like there is this beautiful moment that I think a lot of people have if they're at the place where they're able to like achieve something that they wanted to achieve, reach a certain level of abundance, where then they like sit back down and they're like,
Mm.
ooh, but it's not what I thought it would be. It's not
Right.
like the fix all I thought it would be.
Right.
Have that moment realizing that I'm abundant, my business is successful, I have money, all these things that I thought I really needed, wanted, and it's more fueled from scarcity
Yep.
and like run like than it really is from like sitting in abundance. And you talk about how some Pleiadian teachings came in at that point. Can we talk about those teachings?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, the Pleiadians are my best friends. I came across their books. Well, Barbara Marciniak, who I give credit through my whole book. I read Bringers of the Dawn in 2018, and then I read Earth, and then I read Path to Empowerment, and then I read the dozens of other books by other authors. Watched a ton of YouTube videos. Was spent time on Gaia, TV.
Yes.
Um, Went to Mount Shasta, met them, like have had my experiences with them and touched them and really communed with them in Egypt. But their biggest message, as I have come to unpack, like what is light? Like light is information. Light is you in your full expression of your full power and truth, and your truth, and the truth of this universe is love. And I talk about the divine laws of light that I've coined in my book as truth, information, and love, which is what makes the light work made manifest, right? And we possess those codes in our DNA. And I guess the operative word is DNA to answer your question, because well, the Palladians were a huge activation for me, like from my crown chakra up, right? And I love to hang out up in my galactic hometown. I really, I really got the biggest unlock for me back to pleasure, back to joy, back to suffering was learning how to be in my body, learning how to enjoy the gift of being in the human body. And that is really truly what the Palladians teach us. I mean, we have come here, we're hybrids. We were implanted 200,000 years ago with extraterrestrial DNA. This is what I believe, but lots of scientists will tell you this to be true. And there was a fight for Earth, and there was a lot of darkness that wanted to manipulate the human species. The Palladians wanted to empower the human species because we are quantum. We actually can manipulate and co create our realities with our brains our thoughts, and our bodies are the vessel for multidimensional ascension, pleasure, tantric orgasm, but also just like smelling a flower, right? And I was so out of my body for so long, literally up until about 2 years ago. I mean, this is like I said, I'm still a student to this, but I work at a quantum pace because I am an alien. And I worked with a healer actually. This was in the beginning, right before I left for Egypt. And she took one look at my system and she was like, your root chakra and your sacral chakra are literally dead. Like there's no life in those chakras because I wasn't rooted here in my body. And I think the body is the way. I think the body is how we learn safety to be here in the first place. And when we're here and safe, we can, I believe, receive the human experience. And that includes abundance. I was making all this money, but I didn't feel safe in my own body to hold it, which is what created all this scarcity for more because I was not really technically in abundance because I wasn't in my body. And that's really what I am teaching with my work, with my coaching, and bringing women into this state of their feminine codes and really learning how to heal their nervous systems and slow the fuck down, prioritize play, prioritize nothingness, prioritize boredom, prioritize the simplicity of literally taking a walk in nature to like going to an ecstatic dance party to having sex to being silent. Like we just, it goes to the bottom of our to-do list. And I believe we have to practice those aspects of joy and play and pleasure to simply as a stage one is just to get back into our bodies. And that, is a lot of what the Pleiadians do talk about is the vessel of the human body. I mean, not to go off too much on a tangent, but they talk a lot about like sex. And I'm married. I've been married for 12 years. Like, but I wasn't a prude before him, but I didn't have sex with like hundreds of people. And if you did, like, do you know there's zero judgment here. I say this in the book. Like, I'm all for the sexual liberation of everyone having the hottest sex they want. But the Pleiadians say that there is nothing more sacred than the human body. And that when you're having sex with someone, you're not just merging genitals, you're merging frequency. And your body is your temple. Because unlike plant medicine, an orgasm is like that'll shoot you straight up into the cosmos, right? We've all maybe had them. The mind-blowing type of orgasm, it's you dissolve. And I think that when I read that in Bringers of the Dawn, it gave me a whole new reverence for my sexuality, yes, but my system. And so while they're very much galactic and we can, channel them and meditate with them and go up, their message is what they said to me in Hathor's Temple is the whole point is like, do you understand how powerful you are as a human body on planet Earth? And we've been co-opted to forget.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I think also, you know, I've been attracted more to the subjects that are more earthly,
Mm-hmm.
right? And sometimes I think that, at least for me, because like what you were talking about, which I think happens to not everyone, but some people during their spiritual journey, is that it's so easy for me to like live in the clouds. It's so easy for me. Like I can't even tell you how many years of just like I'm in the Pleiadian star system and that and I'm just like hang out there. The point my assistant like had an intervention with me at one point where she was like, "Okay, that's great, but we have like a business to run right here in this world."
I love you.
Right? But but that really is the assignment. Like that's the earthly assignment. And that's why are we so fascinated with like body and food and money, right? These are the and relationships. These are the earthly assignments, right?
Yes.
These are
Yes.
like the grand lessons for this incarnation.
Mm.
And really when you go back to thinking about it like that, it's like great, like you get to float around up there, there'll be time for that.
Yeah.
And it's great to like tap in and reconnect and have that
Yep.
wisdom come through, but to remember that this is like where we get to integrate this is where we get to play, and this is a precious experience. And even when it's hard lessons around our body or money or relationship, it still is an exclusive experience, right?
Yes. Yes.
In a lot of ways. And and when we think about it like that, I remember I was in like Kundalini yoga teacher training a while ago, and they would
Wow.
say that like never have sex with someone who you wouldn't want to trade lives with.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? Because when you mesh energy fields, you are taking on
All their
that
stuff.
all their energy. And
Yeah.
especially as women, it
Uh-huh.
takes us much longer to release it than men.
Yes.
Right? Right? And don't freak out if you're like, oh my God, I had some sketchy encounters back in the day. You're being okay. But like, I do think that's something to really like consider when you think about like a long-term partner as well,
Yes.
in someone whose field you're going to constantly be in, right?
Yes.
You're really co-creating in that field together.
Yep.
Um, so much, so much. Okay, so let's dive into Egypt a bit.
Okay.
And I don't want them to miss out on this. this. So you had multiple experiences. Actually, wait, before we get to Egypt, we should talk about Pleiadians a little bit because you were
Okay.
connecting with them before,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I was.
So, just for anyone that's listening, that's kind of like it's spiking their interests, and maybe they're like, am I
Mhm.
connected to that? Am I not
Mhm.
connected to that?
Mhm.
What did that kind of initial
Yeah.
inspiration look like that kind of brought you to those books? And, I recommend Bringers of the Dawn to anyone.
It's my Bible. It sits next to my
Yeah.
bed.
Yeah.
Literally, it's my Bible. I so I like I said, I've always been spiritually curious, spiritually on the path for very many years. And I've done all the healing sessions. I've worked with you name it, I'll try it. I don't as much anymore. I'm far more discerning. But there was a particular shaman that I had a session with in 2018. I talk about this in the book. And I really didn't know what she did. Like I heard she was amazing. Like you just go, you see her. There's no plant medicines. There's no like bells and whistles. You lie on a massage table. She puts her hands on the crown of your head and she sits behind you and you both close your eyes and you're in silence for like an hour. And that's it. And during that hour, I journeyed somewhere. I just had these wild visions, but it really wasn't, it was more than a vision. I was traveling and I saw and was immersed in this beautiful space and time that just overwhelmed me with this feeling of home. I felt so much safety. I felt so much love. I felt the energy of beings, but I didn't see them. I just felt them. I I literally was on another planet. That's how the only way I could describe it. And so I come back into my body and all of a sudden as I'm about to open my eyes, I see 11111111 flash kind of below my eyelids, like as if my eyes were closed, like a barcode almost. And I open my eyes and I'm like, okay, what just happened? And she described for me what I had seen. She went there with me. Yeah, she saw it. And she said to me, you're a Pleiadian, Jessica. That's where you're from. And you just visited your home planet. And I was like, huh? Like I was like, but I'm pretty open. I'm into all this stuff. And I was like, I could think this is the craziest thing I've ever heard, or I could like lean in and trust my heart. And that's when I picked up Bringers of the Dawn. I went on this deep journey and obsession to kind of learn what that meant. And, if you read the book, if you read any of their channelings, it's very, very dense. I consider it to be like very intense, um, kind of like fringe spiritual books that like not the average person is necessarily going to understand. But I understood it like a first language. I was like, this is fluent to me. And everything that it said, I felt in my cells to be true. I was like, this is the most articulated message of truth that I've ever found in my life. And I just have communed with them. I've called on them. I've connected with them. Their words have changed my entire reality. And when I went to Egypt, within the first that was an you don't go to Egypt on a vacation. It's a freaking pilgrimage. You're up at 3 in the morning, most mornings, not getting much sleep. You're going into these temples. These temples are alive. They're alive with energies, frequencies, galactic messages. They're they You will journey in these temples on zero medicine. You have otherworldly experiences. And Hathor Dendera is the name of the temple, was one of the last temples we saw. And I was walking through her hallways by myself and I was called to go into a little tiny room alone and I pulled my whole body up against the wall because I got the message, just press your whole body up against this wall. And I closed my eyes and in a matter of seconds I was struck by a white lightning, like it was a flash of diamond white light. And all of a sudden I was transcending. I was beyond the temple. I was beyond Egypt. I was beyond the planet. My whole auric field was infinite. And I started hearing their voices. And in my research of the book, there is a direct line based on the planet Earth of where the Hathor temple is located, is connected to the Pleiadian constellation. And there's actually in mythology of many cultures and religion that there are 7 Hathors, not just one goddess Hathor. There's 7 Hathors. This is reflected in a lot of indigenous culture and religion, as I said. And there's 7 stars in the Pleiadian galaxy or the Pleiadian constellation. Pleiadians are in the Milky Way galaxy. There's multiple star systems in our galaxy. Now, remember, there are billions and trillions of stars in our one single galaxy amongst infinite billions and trillions of galaxies. I mean, when you think about the universe, I can't even, it's mind blowing. But there is Syrians, Arcturians, Minnetonкans. There's all sorts of galactic extraterrestrial star systems that I believe have life. And I think we're all hybrids. I think we all descended from other parts of the universe. And the Pleiadians, the last thing I'll say, because I could go off, clearly I am. And I love that you have such a connection to it too, Cassandra, and the work that you do. The Pleiadians are here on a freaking mission. They are called you if you are a part of the Pleiadian sort of star system, you identify as a member of the family of light. And we are here to fuck shit up for the greater good. We are renegades. We are light warriors. We are here to wake people up. We are often seen and misunderstood as outcasts and revolutionists and conspiracy theorists and whatnot. And truth be told, like, it's because we know the truth and we want humanity. We want to save humanity again. We want the return of light, which is hence the title of that book, Bringers of the Dawn. So I love them. And I highly encourage anyone to kind of find their own resources or potential healers, books. You can take quizzes online if you want. There's
See
so
which
much
star
information out there.
system.
What star system are you from? So yeah, I'm very much clear that, that I, for one, am Palladian.
Yeah, absolutely. Myself as well. And I think a lot of the women that are probably drawn to us are likely as well, because I feel like that's kind of like how it works. We kind of like have like their little beacon that comes out, and you're like, why am I attracted to this person? Or like, why do I resonate? And sometimes, like we were talking about way earlier, sometimes you could be triggered by one of us.
Yeah.
Because you're like, there's something inside of you that's like, oh, okay, like there's something that that person maybe is just a little bit farther ahead on unlocking,
Right.
right? And that your soul knows, like, I meant to unlock that. And sometimes
Mm.
when we get that feeling, when we look at people and we're like, oh man, like, how is she doing that? Or how is she like, whatever, it's not necessarily always from a place, our like 3D mind can say like jealousy, but oftentimes it's really just because our codes are lighting up,
Yeah.
right? And saying like, that could be you. Like
Yeah.
that could be you. Like there's part of you that recognizes that that is actually available to you and might even be the next thing on your path for you to step into. And it's kind of like shaking you up a little bit to try to wake you up and get you to like move forward.
I
So,
love that you said that. That was beautiful for your audience to hear, truly.
yes. So, okay. So I want to talk about, I do want to talk, I want to get to the future light bit of it, about like getting on mission, doing the light work. Um, I want to talk about that. And then I simultaneously also, because I know people are going to have questions, so you can decide which one you want to answer first, is if someone is like, man, like Jess has had all these beautiful mystical experiences. I want to like feel open to that. I want to do that. How do I kind of open myself up to those
Mm.
literal divine downloads? Name of the podcast. I love it. But both questions, whichever one you feel called to answer first.
So my first question is going to be read my book
Yeah, yeah.
because no, truly, I say this in the book, like this book isn't here to convince you to buy a plane ticket to Egypt, although it
You
might,
probably will.
and you should go.
You should go.
You should absolutely go. You know, what's coming up for me is just really taking a look at your taking an honest look, and this to get here even takes work, and hire a therapist, work with a coach, hire Cassandra, like work, find your partners. But so much of who I've become has entailed who I've had to unbecome, and really looking at your patterning, your belief systems, your triggers, your tendencies, and asking yourself, where did these really come from? Are these really even mine? Because I do say in my book, and I believe this, like the human experience is one big amnesia trip. And the fact of the matter is it was for our parents and our parents' parents and our parents. And we now have DNA that has been carbon copied, reprinting in our bodies for generations. And so much of what is causing us suffering and making us feel stuck or not able to connect or feel like we're behind or not an open channel, whatever is your story, is worth examining, is really worth getting to the bottom of, and really sitting in as much silence with self as possible. I mean, meditation is always recommends, it's overplayed. I say just take a walk in nature, listen to some beautiful music, journal, like just cultivate a relationship with yourself to quiet the noise, and whatever comes up for you is there for you to unpack and look at. And I think it's so accelerated when we're working with again, a mirror, a coach, a guide, a healer, a therapist. But it really just starts with taking an honest, radically, radically self-aware and responsible look at your own shit. And you get the choice to choose what you do with that and who you get to be because of that. And
I
that's
love
not
that. I love that
necessarily an
because
easy practice.
it's not an easy practice, but I agree with, sometimes again, we have that like spell of this world that's trying to tell us we have to like do something, like almost like I describe it. This is like a decade old metaphor, but I started in vegan cupcakes.
Yeah.
And
Amazing.
that was like my first entrepreneurial endeavor. I used to describe it as like putting strawberry icing on a shit cupcake. And it's like, it's amazing how if you just try to like slop up some pretty yummy icing on top of like a foundation that's not really built well, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the cupcake's still gonna be crappy, just with like a little added flair, right? But if in those moments, like if we go back down and we actually like take a look at the ingredients of the cupcake and say like, what's not working?
Yeah.
What do we have to unpack here? What do we need to change? What do we have to swap out, right? Then like it's amazing when we start swapping those things out, the person that we're meant to become, the light work we're meant to do in the world, right? And I say light work, but also oftentimes the like work
The
we're
shadow work. Yeah.
yeah, like the work we're meant to do in the world unveils itself, right?
Yes.
And then it's like when you remove everything that's not you, all you're left with is you,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that just becomes, the flow,
Right.
right?
Right. You know, I say this in the beginning of the book. Like I have a whole section at the one of the very first chapters, like before the book starts. I say, but first a word about the dark. And I because I really don't want this book or any conversation around light, Pleiadians, the goddess codes, to be a spiritual bypassed conversation. Like we find our light in the polarity, in the human experience, which is filled with shame and grief and heartache and jealousy and scarcity and competition and these like ugly, nasty parts of life and ourselves, right? As above, so below. And we have to really do the work to really look at those things, own those things, claim radical responsibility for those things before we can change them. It's up to us, babe. You're up to you. And I love that metaphor. of the cupcake. That's amazing.
I love that. Um, so as we wrap up, is there any last thing that you feel like called on your heart, any
Mm.
message or transmission that you feel like maybe we just
Mm.
didn't
Mm.
organically get through that you'd like to share before
Hmm.
you close?
Yeah, what just came to me is, there's this whole conversation around awakening, and I think, sorry, can you hear my dog?
You're
Great.
good. You're good.
My dog's a monster. Um, I actually think the word awakening is somewhat of a tired, not it's not accurate. I really believe in the word remember, that we've always been this powerful, we've always been this limitless, we've always been this worthy. We've just forgotten. And when we really truly do the work, we don't just simply awaken. Like awakening is part one, right? But then when we remember the truth of who we are, that's really when our joy comes online. And I really think that's the message of my whole book is joy. Like to remember the human experience. Your human experience is meant to be fun and joyful and blissful. And we can only uncover the depth of that joy if we're willing to go into the depth of our own dark. And that's really what my book is, truly the invitation home to. And so, yeah, I hope your audience remembered some things today.
I love it. I love it. I'm sure there are lots of remembrances stirred up. And I want to remind you guys, little homework for y'all after you're listening to this, that you can do like one radical act of like joy and enjoying your human incarnation today. And like just ask yourself, like, what's on your heart to do? Like, maybe you want to take an awesome bubble bath. Maybe you're like, you know what? I'm gonna like I haven't gotten an ice cream cone for a while. I'm gonna go get my favorite flavor ice cream cone and like walk around the park and like look at the birds in the park, right? Like some
So
simple
true. No,
radical
it's
act of
amazing.
joy
Yes.
will unlock even more codes. And sometimes I think, again, like our patriarchal system tries to overcomplicate everything for us,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
the truth is often way simpler than we give it credit for.
It really is. It really is so simple. So simple.
So go get the light work. I'm sure you're all intrigued. There's so much more in this book. I could literally do like a 4-hour episode with Jessica unpacking all of it. And it is just such a beautiful guide through, like, I love how you did it, like the inner, the outer, the future, and these different topics. And there's, whether you're thinking about this in relationship to your friendships and your romantic relationships, we didn't touch on that so much, but it is in the book. She talks about like deeper into your relationship with your body in the book, getting on a mission. Like, there's just so much. And so I think this is a great pop off point for a lot of you too.
Yeah.
If you're like, I'm curious about the Pleiadians, or I'm curious about Hathor or Isis or Sekhmet, which we also didn't get to, but there's great stories about Sekhmet in here, right? Like, allow your curiosity to guide you and your joy to guide you. And the things that you have, I think the things I love so much about books like this is that I really think like they're gateways, right? And so allow the things, like, you're naturally going to be attracted to certain things. Trust it, go deeper into it, and allow yourself to just honor like where you're being pulled and what feels like fun. And you're like, oh my God, I didn't even know about Sekhmet and like this whole thing. Great. Like, go read a book on Sekhmet. Go like research her. Go, like dive in and let this like unlock. I think this is going to unlock so much for so many people. I'm going to put all the links below to get in contact with you, as well as to get their hands on this book. Is there anything else you want to let people know about how your favorite way for them to stay in touch with you is?
Yeah, you're amazing, Cassandra. Thank you for that reflection and that description. It's just so, I receive it. It's beautiful. And this book is newly now in people's hands. And it's a big deal to hear you say all that. So the best way to get the book, I would encourage your listeners to go to thelightworkbook.com, which we'll send you. And if you buy the book, the lightworkbook dot on the lightworkbook.com, I hook you up with close to $3,000 worth of pre-order bonuses, and you get them right away, like on demand in your inbox. So definitely go to thelightworkbook.com and come say hi to me on Instagram. I'm Jessica Zweig. That's how you say my last name. Just my first and last name. You can go to jessicazweig.com to learn more about me. And I would just love to meet anyone in your community, because like attracts like as much as light attracts light. And you are light. And I would love to, I'm sure your community is just such a beautiful reflection of you. So thank you for having me today.
Yay! Thank you for being with us. And everybody, check the links below for all of those details. I'll have all of those right there for you.